There are moments when history changes without making a sound, and today is one of those moments. While countless people will move through their routines without looking up, unaware that anything extraordinary is taking place, the sky is opening a doorway that has not appeared for 12 years. The previous time this exact cycle unfolded, the direction of millions of lives quietly shifted onto entirely different paths. Many never realized that a single astrological movement had become the invisible force behind opportunities, awakenings, and transformations that would define the years that followed. That same threshold is opening once again. Today, Tuesday, June 30th, Jupiter, the largest planet in our solar system, the great benefic, the celestial force associated with expansion, prosperity, wisdom, fortune, and limitless growth, leaves one chapter behind and enters the fire sign of Leo. With that single transition, a completely new 12-month cycle begins, one that only returns once every 12 years. This is not the kind of transit that simply colors the emotional atmosphere for a few days before fading into the background. It represents a profound shift in the larger rhythm of collective life. It signals the beginning of a new era of possibility. It is as though the universe is placing a crown upon a new kingdom, declaring that the next chapter has officially begun. Even more remarkable, 3 zodiac signs stand at the center of this turning point, positioned to experience life-changing opportunities unlike anything they have seen in over a decade. Yet almost everyone is overlooking the most important part of the story. Jupiter is not stepping into Leo during a calm and peaceful season. It arrives while the heavens remain charged with some of the most concentrated astrological tension experienced in years. That detail changes everything. Perhaps you have noticed an unusual weight pressing against your thoughts recently. Maybe you have struggled to explain why everyday life suddenly feels denser, slower, or strangely suspended, almost as though reality itself has paused before taking its next breath. If that sensation has been following you, it is not simply your imagination. There is an unmistakable astrological reason for it, and understanding that reason reveals why everything unfolding this week carries far greater significance than most people realize. What is happening now is not merely another interesting transit on an astrology calendar. It is the kind of alignment that only emerges once in a generation. And regardless of whether your zodiac sign belongs to the 3 receiving the brightest spotlight, every person alive will be living under a completely rewritten set of energetic conditions after today. Before we can understand why Jupiter's arrival matters so deeply, we have to acknowledge the landscape that has been forming beneath our feet. If this month has felt emotionally exhausting, mentally confusing, or spiritually intense, there is a reason. June of 2026 has not unfolded like an ordinary month. Instead, it has steadily built toward this exact moment, adding layer upon layer of emotional pressure until many people found themselves carrying feelings they could not fully explain. Long before today's dramatic entrance, the process had already begun. At the very beginning of the month, Mercury entered Cancer, gently pulling the collective focus away from detached logic and directing attention toward memory, emotion, vulnerability, and unresolved inner experiences. Conversations naturally became more personal. Subjects people had avoided suddenly resurfaced. Emotional chapters that many believed had already been completed returned unexpectedly, asking to be acknowledged with greater honesty than before. Memories once buried beneath productivity or distraction quietly rose back into awareness, refusing to disappear until they received genuine attention. Then the atmosphere shifted again. Around June 3rd, Mercury formed a square with Neptune, introducing a layer of uncertainty that blurred perception in ways many people found difficult to describe. Thoughts became harder to organize. Clarity seemed to dissolve just when it was needed most. Distinguishing between objective truth and personal projection became unusually challenging. Misunderstandings multiplied. Conversations produced more confusion than resolution. Even simple decisions suddenly felt heavier, as though every possible choice carried hidden consequences that could not yet be seen. For a brief period, it felt almost as if reality itself had been covered by a soft veil, making certainty nearly impossible to reach. Yet before that uncertainty could become overwhelming, the heavens offered one remarkable gift. On June 9th, Venus and Jupiter met in an exact conjunction during the final degrees of Cancer. Classical astrology has long recognized this meeting between the lesser benefic and the greater benefic as one of the most fortunate alignments available in the celestial language. The timing was deeply meaningful. Before the emotional climate transformed completely, the universe delivered one final wave of nourishment, compassion, generosity, healing, and abundance. Many people experienced this influence in deeply personal ways. Some encountered unexpected kindness precisely when they needed reassurance the most. Others discovered surprising financial opportunities that seemed to arrive without warning. Many simply felt an unfamiliar sense of emotional safety, as though an unseen presence had wrapped around them and whispered that they would not face the coming changes alone. Those experiences were not random coincidences. They reflected the extraordinary blessing carried by that conjunction, serving as a final reminder that support was available before the energy shifted into something dramatically different. Because everything after that point would begin moving with far greater intensity. The transition toward Leo did not begin with Jupiter. Venus led the way first, and that sequence carries enormous significance. One of the overlooked patterns in astrology is that the faster-moving inner planets frequently prepare the energetic landscape before the slower planetary giants arrive. They move ahead like trusted messengers, introducing the themes that will later be magnified by the larger planets following behind them. On June 13th, Venus departed Cancer and entered Leo, arriving exactly 17 days before Jupiter would make the same transition. That timing was not accidental. It functioned like an advance announcement from the universe, quietly preparing humanity for what was approaching. As Venus settled into Leo, the collective emotional atmosphere immediately began changing. Protective instincts slowly gave way to courageous self-expression. Remaining invisible no longer felt comfortable. The longing to create, to celebrate beauty, to experience romance, to receive recognition, and to express one's authentic identity became increasingly difficult to suppress. People found themselves craving something deeper than safety. They wanted to be acknowledged for who they truly were. They wanted their gifts, voices, passions, and creativity to occupy space without apology. That emotional frequency is exactly the environment Jupiter requires in order to unfold its greatest blessings. During these past 17 days, Venus has quietly transformed the stage behind the scenes, adjusting every detail before the main event. The atmosphere has been warming. The lights have been rising. The audience has been taking their seats without even realizing it. Now, with Jupiter crossing into Leo today, everything that has been building beneath the surface is finally ready to emerge into full view. And the performance that begins from this moment forward promises to become one of the defining chapters of this entire 12-year cycle. Before we arrive at the moment everyone has been waiting for, before revealing the 3 zodiac signs standing on the edge of a life-changing transformation, there is one final piece of the story you need to understand. Without it, everything happening today can easily be misunderstood. The hours leading into this new chapter carried an intensity that many people felt without realizing where it was coming from. In many ways, the night before Jupiter crossed into Leo may have been the emotional climax of this entire sequence. If last night felt unusually heavy, strangely emotional, or impossible to explain, there was a reason hidden within the sky itself. Monday, June 29th, the very day this message reaches you, stands as one of the most astrologically charged days of the entire year. Within only a matter of hours, Two major celestial events unfolded almost back to back, and their combined influence continues to ripple through the collective consciousness. Their effects did not disappear when the calendar changed. They're still moving through every conversation, every memory, every emotional response, and every quiet moment of reflection people are experiencing today. The first event occurred when Mercury stationed retrograde at 26 degrees of Cancer. A planetary station is unlike an ordinary transit. It is not simply a change in direction. Before reversing course, the planet appears to pause, creating a moment of extraordinary concentration. During that stillness, the symbolism carried by the planet becomes stronger, more personal, and impossible to ignore. Mercury governs the way you think, communicate, process information, solve problems, and interpret the world around you. At this moment, that mental force is standing completely still within Cancer, the sign most closely connected with emotion, memory, family, vulnerability, and the deepest chambers of the heart. Rather than encouraging forward momentum, Mercury begins drawing awareness backward. Old conversations suddenly echo through the mind. Memories believed to be long resolved quietly return. Emotional situations that seemed complete reveal unfinished layers demanding another look. If you have found yourself revisiting choices you already made, questioning conversations that happened long ago, or feeling as though your thoughts have become unusually slow and difficult to organize, there is a deeper reason behind that experience. Instead of flowing with ease, the mind can feel as though every idea must travel through something dense before reaching clarity. This retrograde is not random confusion. It functions as a psychological review that cannot be skipped. It is as though the universe is placing every unresolved emotional experience on the table and saying that nothing unfinished can be carried into the next chapter. Before the future fully opens, the past must be honestly examined. Before expansion can begin, emotional debts that have quietly accumulated must first be acknowledged. Then, only hours after Mercury reached that powerful station, another equally significant event arrived. The full moon in Capricorn reached its peak. This lunation appeared as a strawberry moon and also as a micromoon, positioned at its greatest distance from Earth, causing it to appear smaller and softer in the night sky. Yet appearances can be deeply misleading. Although its light seemed gentle, the energetic impact reached one of the most sensitive polarities within the zodiac. The full moon illuminated the Cancer and Capricorn axis, drawing attention toward the delicate balance between home and career, emotional security and public responsibility, private vulnerability and outward achievement. One side represents the part of you seeking comfort, protection, and genuine belonging. The other represents the version of yourself that builds, performs, succeeds, and creates lasting structure in the external world. Under this full moon, every hidden imbalance became visible. Places where work had quietly consumed personal well-being could no longer remain invisible. Expectations that once motivated progress suddenly revealed themselves as burdens, no longer aligned with the person you are becoming. Foundations that once appeared solid, exposed. Subtle fractures that had been developing beneath the surface for far longer than most people realized. What makes this sequence truly remarkable is not simply that these events occurred, but when they occurred. Mercury's retrograde station, the emotional reckoning it initiated, and the Capricorn full moon all unfolded on the very eve of Jupiter entering Leo. The timing feels almost intentional, as though the universe refused to allow the next chapter to begin before clearing away everything that no longer belonged within it. It resembles a theater where the previous production has completely ended. The scenery is dismantled, the curtains are removed. The stage is stripped down until nothing unnecessary remains. Only then can an entirely new performance be created. If sleep escaped you last night, if unexpected emotions surfaced without warning, if memories rose with surprising force against emotional walls you believed were secure, it was not necessarily evidence that something inside you was falling apart. It may have been the opposite. Space was being created. Old emotional structures were being removed, so something entirely new could eventually stand in their place. And now the turning point finally arrives. During the early hours of Tuesday, June 30th, Jupiter officially crosses into Leo, beginning a completely new 12-year cycle. Jupiter has always represented expansion. Whatever falls under its influence becomes larger, more visible, more powerful, and impossible to ignore. Leo, ruled by the Sun, carries the qualities of fixed fire, expressing creativity, romance, leadership, joyful self-expression, confidence, playfulness, and the courage to occupy space without shrinking. When these two forces unite, the atmosphere changes dramatically. The message carried by the sky transforms almost overnight. Throughout the previous 12 months, while Jupiter traveled through Cancer, the collective invitation emphasized emotional protection, strengthening personal foundations, nurturing inner security, and safeguarding what mattered most. Now the message becomes entirely different. Instead of encouraging retreat, the heavens call for visibility. Instead of remaining hidden, they encourage authentic expression. Instead of accepting a life built around limitation, they invite bold participation. The desire to create something meaningful, to lead with conviction, to love openly, and finally bring long-delayed dreams into reality grows with tremendous force under this transit. Ideas that have remained quietly waiting no longer wish to stay hidden. Creative impulses become increasingly difficult to suppress. Remaining unnoticed may begin to feel more uncomfortable than taking the risk of being fully seen. It is as though the universe is extending an invitation for every individual to stand in their own light without apology, embracing the unique identity that has been waiting beneath fear and hesitation. Yet this remarkable expansion also carries an important warning. Every planetary gift contains its own shadow. When limitless growth meets the human ego, confidence can easily drift toward arrogance if awareness is lost. The same celestial influence capable of inspiring extraordinary leadership can also magnify self-importance and reckless self-obsession. Under Jupiter in Leo, the difference between authentic radiance and inflated pride becomes one of the most important lessons each person will be asked to recognize. The very same current, capable of inspiring timeless works of creativity, can just as easily inflate empty displays when authenticity is missing. That is the paradox hidden inside Jupiter's passage through Leo. This energy does not automatically create greatness. Instead, it magnifies the intention already living within the person who receives it. Looking back to Jupiter's previous journey through Leo between 2014 and 2015, history offers a remarkable illustration of both possibilities. During that period, Hamilton emerged and completely transformed the landscape of modern storytelling, demonstrating what becomes possible when artistic vision meets genuine purpose. That same cycle also witnessed the Ice Bucket Challenge, a movement that blended public performance with sincere compassion, ultimately raising more than $100 million for charity. Yet the story did not unfold in only one direction. The identical transit also coincided with one of the most theatrical and ego-driven political moments of the modern era. The now famous descent on a golden escalator that marked the beginning of a political chapter which would reshape an entire generation of public life. None of these outcomes happened because Jupiter favored one path over another. Jupiter simply enlarged whatever already existed. It neither rewarded nor punished. It reflected. If someone approached this energy with generosity, creative courage, and an open heart, those qualities expanded beyond expectation. If another person entered the same current, driven by vanity, entitlement, or the pursuit of applause without substance, those traits became equally impossible to ignore, and the consequences often proved just as dramatic as the initial rise. That is why the most important question surrounding today's transit is not whether Jupiter has entered Leo. That has already happened. The real question is what kind of intention you choose to place inside this tremendous force. The answer to that question determines whether expansion becomes a blessing or a burden. Yet there is another layer to this story that receives far less attention, and it may be the very factor that separates this cycle from the one experienced more than a decade ago. Jupiter is not simply stepping into Leo by itself. It is entering an exceptionally complex network of outer planetary relationships that will shape the energetic landscape for the next several months. While much of the collective focus remains fixed on Jupiter alone, the larger celestial architecture surrounding it tells an even more powerful story. Soon after arriving in Leo, Jupiter forms an exact opposition with Pluto in Aquarius. This alignment represents a direct encounter between personal identity and collective systems, between individual authority and larger structures of power. Leo naturally declares the importance of personal leadership and authentic self-expression. Aquarius reminds everyone that no individual exists above the greater community. As Jupiter and Pluto face one another across this axis, tensions surrounding influence, control, and power become increasingly visible. Conflicts over ideology grow stronger. Questions surrounding personal freedom, creative independence, and the expanding reach of technological and social systems move toward a point where compromise becomes more difficult. At the same time, however, the sky presents a completely different possibility. Jupiter also forms a harmonious sextile with Uranus in Gemini. Under this influence, unexpected opportunities can emerge without warning. Revolutionary ideas appear almost instantly, as though arriving from a place beyond ordinary logic. Surprising breakthroughs, fortunate developments, and sudden moments of innovation become far more accessible than usual. Alongside that supportive aspect comes another extraordinary alignment, a graceful trine connecting Jupiter with Neptune in Aries. Here, imagination flows effortlessly into action. Spiritual insight strengthens creative expression. Inspiration no longer remains abstract, but begins moving naturally toward tangible creation. Many people may experience an unusually powerful sense that their deeper purpose is finally finding a clear direction. When these outer planetary influences are viewed together, the picture becomes far richer than simple expansion. The summer of 2026 is not merely offering more opportunities, it is functioning as a refining fire. There will undoubtedly be moments of resistance. Personal ambition may collide with collective expectations in ways that demand maturity and self-awareness. At times, the desire for recognition could meet opposition from forces much larger than the individual. Yet within that same landscape exist extraordinary possibilities for brilliance, astonishing luck, creative breakthroughs, and moments of inspiration that seem almost impossible to explain through ordinary reasoning. This is the energetic environment Jupiter enters today. And within that environment, 3 zodiac signs stand in positions where these influences become especially life-changing. Every zodiac sign will experience the effects of this transit in some meaningful way. Every chart contains a specific house that Jupiter now begins to activate, expanding one particular area of life over the coming 12 months. However, the geometry of astrology is remarkably precise, and some positions receive stronger currents than others. For those whose sun, moon, or rising sign falls in Leo, Aries, or Scorpio, this moment represents far more than gradual improvement. It marks the beginning of an entirely new 12-year cycle, filled with extraordinary potential for success, visibility, growth, and opportunities capable of permanently altering life's direction. That process begins the moment Jupiter enters Leo. Among those 3 signs, Leo stands at the very center of the story. If you are a Leo, today may feel strangely familiar, even if you cannot immediately explain why. Perhaps over the past year, you sense that something essential inside you had gone unusually quiet. Maybe your natural confidence seemed hidden beneath circumstances that demanded solitude rather than recognition. You may have struggled to understand why your usual vitality felt distant, as though a part of yourself had been waiting patiently behind a closed door. There is a clear astrological reason for that experience. During the previous 12 months, Jupiter traveled through your 12th house, the realm associated with solitude, the subconscious, spiritual retreat, hidden growth, and endings that unfold away from public attention. Although that period encouraged profound internal development, much of the progress occurred where few people could witness it. Necessary healing took place behind the scenes. Important chapters quietly reached completion. Invisible preparation replaced outward achievement. For a sign whose nature flourishes through creativity, confidence, and visibility, that experience often felt less like growth and more like exile. But that chapter reaches its conclusion today. As Jupiter crosses into your first house, one of the most significant transits available in astrology begins. Instead of directing energy inward, expansion now radiates through every layer of your identity. Your physical presence, your confidence, your personal magnetism, and the way others naturally respond to you all begin shifting together. It can feel as though a light that had slowly faded over time suddenly returns with overwhelming brightness. People notice you differently because you begin carrying yourself differently. Opportunities appear because your presence itself becomes more expansive. This is not simply a fortunate season. It is the beginning of a profound return to your own authority, a year in which the sovereign finally steps back onto the throne that has been waiting all along. What once seemed impossible to move will suddenly begin gathering momentum. Doors that remained stubbornly closed may open with surprising ease. The confidence that has felt uncertain or quietly shaken can solidify into something far more stable and enduring. Every area connected with romance, artistic expression, leadership, and personal reinvention now stands beneath an entirely different sky. It is as though the universe has erased the limits of the previous chapter and placed an untouched canvas before you, inviting you to create without fear of making yourself visible. Yet every extraordinary gift carries its own responsibility. Jupiter crossing the first house does not expand only opportunities. It also magnifies the physical experience of life itself, making excess a genuine temptation if awareness is lost. Pleasure becomes easier to justify. Comfort becomes more seductive. The challenge is not avoiding abundance, but directing this tremendous wave of vitality into movement, creativity, purpose, and courageous action, instead of allowing it to settle into indulgence. Build boldly. Create without hesitation. Lead with the confidence you have spent years cultivating. Most importantly, stop believing you must apologize for wanting recognition. The spotlight was never something you needed to earn by becoming smaller. It has always belonged to you. Then our attention turns toward Aries, where another remarkable chapter begins. If your sun, moon, or rising sign falls in Aries, pay close attention because Jupiter now enters a fellow fire sign, creating a perfect trine with your natal energy. Among the harmonious alignments recognized in astrology, few offer support as naturally as this one. Its influence arrives through your 5th house, the realm governing romance, creativity, pleasure, children, self-expression, and the pure joy of being fully alive. Before looking ahead, pause for a moment and consider everything you have already endured. The past several years have demanded resilience. Much of your energy has gone toward rebuilding, restructuring, confronting obstacles, and carrying burdens that few people truly recognized. You have invested countless hours in invisible work, strengthening yourself from within while receiving very little acknowledgement from the outside world. There were seasons when perseverance mattered more than celebration, and determination replaced excitement. That chapter now begins to shift. Jupiter, moving through your 5th house, invites something radically different. Instead of asking you to survive, It encourages you to rediscover delight. Instead of measuring every step through discipline alone, it reminds you that joy also has a purpose. Creative ideas you have repeatedly postponed deserve to be brought into the world. Romantic opportunities that awaken genuine excitement deserve your openness instead of immediate doubt. The impulse to follow your passion rather than your fear deserves your trust. For some, this expansion becomes beautifully literal through the growth of family, the arrival of children, or meaningful opportunities connected with education, mentorship, or guiding younger generations. For others, the symbolism unfolds in different ways. A creative vision may finally take shape. A love story may begin with an intensity that feels almost cinematic. A forgotten sense of happiness may return so unexpectedly that it feels unfamiliar at first. None of this arises by accident. Jupiter does not enter the fifth house without purpose. It arrives because the difficult work has already been done. You have walked through the fire long enough. Now the lesson changes. Fire was never meant only to test your endurance. It was always meant to become the force through which something beautiful could finally be created. Then we arrive at Scorpio, where the story carries a very different tone. This chapter asks for courage above all else. Jupiter now rises into your 10th house, the highest point of your natal chart, the place associated with career, public reputation, professional achievement, legacy, and the direction your life leaves upon the world. Unlike the graceful support offered to Aries, this influence arrives through a square 90 degrees of creative tension, pressure, and necessary action. This aspect does not allow passive observation. It demands participation. Everything you have been developing quietly behind the scenes now approaches the moment of public visibility. The careful work completed in private, the relentless effort invested when no one was watching, the long preparation hidden beneath the surface, all of it reaches a point where remaining unseen is no longer possible. The universe no longer supports hiding your gifts. Instead, it begins placing opportunities directly before you that can transform your professional life in ways not experienced for 12 years. Recognition, advancement, authority, leadership, and positions that once appeared permanently beyond reach now become realistic possibilities standing directly along your path. Yet this remarkable opportunity also presents Scorpio with its greatest internal challenge. Your natural instinct often favors operating quietly, maintaining influence without unnecessary exposure, protecting vulnerability behind strength and control. Jupiter traveling through Leo asks for the exact opposite. It encourages visibility rather than concealment. It asks you to allow people to witness your work, your voice, your presence, and even your imperfections. For Scorpio, that level of openness can feel profoundly uncomfortable. Yet hidden within that discomfort lies the very doorway leading toward everything you have spent years building. The career you imagined, the public respect you deserve, and the recognition capable of transforming your financial reality all wait beyond a single decision. That decision is choosing visibility over invisibility. It is choosing to speak with confidence instead of remaining silent. It is choosing to claim your accomplishments openly rather than hoping someone eventually discovers them. The world is finally prepared to see everything you have been creating. The only remaining question is whether you are willing to let yourself be seen. Of course, this extraordinary transit belongs to everyone, not only these 3 signs. Every zodiac sign experiences Jupiter's generosity through a different area of life. Taurus begins expanding through home, family, and emotional foundations. Gemini experiences growth through communication, learning, and influence within the local environment. Cancer receives opportunities connected with personal finances, resources, and self-worth. Virgo enters a deeply meaningful cycle of spiritual healing and subconscious renewal, Libra finds friendships, communities, and long-cherished aspirations expanding through powerful new connections. Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter itself, steps into a period of philosophical awakening and worldwide expansion. Capricorn gains access to transformative shared resources. Aquarius experiences remarkable blessings within committed partnerships. Pisces discovers meaningful growth through daily work, health, and service. Every sign participates in this new chapter. No one is excluded from Jupiter's generosity. Yet the sheer intensity, momentum, visibility, and transformative potential unfolding for Leo, Aries, and Scorpio place those three signs in an especially remarkable position during the 12 months ahead. As this day begins, many people will reach for their phones before they even step out of bed. They may briefly notice that Jupiter has entered a new sign, read a headline, glance at a short explanation, and continue with their routines without giving it another thought. They will never fully appreciate how uncommon this moment truly is. They will not recognize that an entirely new 12-year cycle has quietly begun, or understand that an extraordinary window of possibility has just opened. But something brought you here today, and perhaps that is because you have already sensed this shift long before hearing anyone explain it. For weeks, you may have felt unusual, emotional intensity, vivid dreams, heightened intuition, or the persistent feeling that life was approaching an invisible turning point. Those sensations were not without meaning. They were pointing toward this exact moment. The doorway now stands open. Ahead lies a year filled with expansion, opportunity, creative vitality, and fortunate possibilities that do not arrive often. Yet these gifts respond to authenticity. They ask for courage rooted in the heart. They require a willingness to express who you truly are without hiding behind fear or seeking permission from others. Jupiter in Leo does not favor hesitation. It does not reward shrinking in order to remain comfortable. Instead, it amplifies those who choose courageous leadership, genuine creativity, and wholehearted self-expression. Today, the next 12-year cycle begins. The stage has already been prepared. The lights are already shining. The opportunity is already here. What remains is only one decision. Will you step forward and claim the life waiting for you? If this message resonated with you and you would like to continue exploring these extraordinary astrological cycles together, thank you for spending this time here. Your support means more than you know. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments, because every journey adds another layer to this growing community. Until we meet again, continue moving forward with courage. Stay open to the signs the universe places before you. Take good care of yourself, and remember to subscribe so you never miss the next chapter.